to part 6 of the real Easter story. And as always, we have some review questions for you. So are you ready? Question number 1. What sad news did Jesus tell his disciples when they were going to the Garden of Gethsemane? Jaden?
That they were going to abandon him.
That they were going to abandon him. That's right, run away from him when trouble came. Number 2, which 3 disciples did Jesus take with him a little further into the garden, Jansen?
Peter, James, and John.
Peter, James, and John. Number 3, who came to strengthen Jesus when he was praying in the garden? Jace.
An angel.
An angel from heaven, that's right. And if you remember our picture from last time, I love this because even today, God still strengthens us in our darkest hour. All right, number 4. Jaden, what did Judas do to show the angry crowd who Jesus was? Remember, there was a sign. What was that sign?
That he kissed him.
Yes, he gave Jesus a kiss. Number 5, what happened when Jesus said, I am he? Jansen.
They all fell down because that's how powerful his words were.
Yes, they all fell backwards and they fell down to the ground. That's right. That's how powerful God's words are. Number 6, what did Peter do when they tried to arrest Jesus? Jace.
He got his dagger, started swinging it around, and he cut off a man named Malchus's right ear.
Yes, he cut off the right ear of a guy named Malchus. Good. All right, very good. You are doing great on those review questions. Now we have 3 more code words for you that I've hidden in our story. Now these are a little different from the last code words that we had. So listen very carefully to these ones, okay? Annas, Caiaphas, and Sanhedrin. Annas, Caiaphas, and Sanhedrin. Now the first 2, Annas and Caiaphas, are high priests, so they're guys, and then the Sanhedrin is a council of guys, a whole bunch of guys that serve the high priest. So be listening for those code words in our story, okay? They're very important to our story. All right, so let's back up a little bit and remember when we were talking about Jesus, when he told Peter that he was going to deny him 3 times before the rooster crowed twice. And Peter said, no, I'll never deny you, Lord, never. Well, remember that because that's going to come up again later in our story. So we left off with the angry crowd leading Jesus to Caiaphas, and the disciples had fled. Well, Peter and another disciple actually were following the crowd a little bit far off. They wanted to stay back because maybe they didn't want to get arrested either. So they followed the crowd, but they kept their distance. And when they got to the palace of the high priest, they went inside, but they sat with the servants, and they were warming themselves by the fire, probably because they didn't want anyone to see them or notice them. So they took Jesus before the Jewish leaders. The first guy that they took him to was a guy named Annas. They took him to Annas, and Annas asked him, what have you been saying to these people? And Jesus said, well, they know what I've been saying to them. I've been at the temple every day teaching and preaching to them. So why don't you ask them? And one of the officers there slapped Jesus and said, how dare you talk to the high priest like that? And Jesus said, have I done anything wrong? What have I done wrong? If I've done wrong, tell me. They couldn't. They couldn't. And so Annas sent him off to a different guy. He pawned him off to a different guy. He sent him to Caiaphas. And Caiaphas was the leader of the council called the Sanhedrin, a group of guys. And Caiaphas was actually the son-in-law to Annas. But Caiaphas was appointed by the Roman government. So and the Sanhedrin was kind of like the judges of the day. So all these false witnesses started coming and talking about Jesus and trying to accuse him and trying to find something wrong with him. But none of their stories really matched up. And Jesus just stood there. And he said nothing. Well, Caiaphas asked him, why aren't you saying anything? Aren't you going to defend yourself? And Jesus still said nothing. And he said, tell me, are you the Christ, the Son of God? And Jesus said, I am. And Caiaphas rent his clothes. They said he rent his clothes. Ah, you heard it. He speaks blasphemy. Ah. Now, I call that a drama llama. Caiaphas was being a drama llama. And as you can see in this picture, now this isn't a high priest, But you can see this guy wrenching his clothes, tearing it, and there's the drama llama there. That's kind of how Caiaphas was acting. He was acting like a drama llama, wrenching his clothes and saying, you heard it. He speaks blasphemy. He called himself the Son of God. And so the Jewish people started joining in on this drama, and they said the same thing. Oh, he speaks blasphemy. How dare he say that? And they started being very mean to him, and they started spitting on him, and they were mocking him, and they blindfolded him, and they started hitting him, and they said, if you're God, tell us who hit you. Who was it who hit you? And they started mocking him and being terrible to him. Well, while all this was going on, remember Peter? He was warming himself by the fire. Well, a girl had come by, and she was looking at him, and she said, oh, this man was with Jesus. And Peter said, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. And then a little while later, another girl comes and says, yeah, you were with Jesus. And he says, I don't know this man, Jesus. I don't know what you're talking about. And then a little while later, another guy said, surely you were with Jesus. Your speech, you sound like him. And Peter started cursing and getting angry. And he said, I do not know this man. And right then, the rooster crowed. And Peter remembered the words of Jesus. He had denied Jesus 3 times, just like Jesus said he was going to do. And Peter went out and wept bitterly, which means he cried uncontrollably. He was so ashamed that he had done that. Well, back at the palace where they were mocking Jesus, the Sanhedrin had finally decided to condemn Jesus to death. We're going to condemn Jesus to death. But although they could condemn people to death, they couldn't actually put people to death. Only the Roman governor could do that. So they had to take Jesus to the Roman governor. And the Roman governor at the time, his name was Pontius Pilate. And so off to Pontius Pilate they went with Jesus. Well, now remember Judas? Judas, the guy who had betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver? Well, when he heard that the Sanhedrin had condemned Jesus to death, he started regretting his decision. He said, oh, this is wrong. I was wrong. And he took his 30 pieces of silver and he went back to the chief priests and went to the palace and he said, I have sinned. Jesus is innocent. I have betrayed innocent blood. And they answered him and they said, well, what is that to us? We got what we wanted. And Judas took his 30 pieces of silver and he threw them down on the temple and he ran out and he hung himself. What a sad ending to a man who was once the closest friend to Jesus. He walked with Jesus, a disciple of Jesus. Well, the chief priests took the money. They took the money that he had thrown down and they said, well, what are we going to do with this money? We can't put it in the treasury. This is blood money. So they took it and they bought a potter's field with it where they could bury strangers in it. And to this day, that field is still called the field of blood because it was bought with money that was used to take Jesus's life. So now the Sanhedrin is taking Jesus to Pontius Pilate, who could carry out this death penalty. And we're going to talk about that trial next time. So did you find our code words, our big code words? Annas, Caiaphas, and Sanhedrin? I hope you did. Okay, we will see you in our next video, okay? Bye.
Bye.